Everyone from both the left and the right must help fix the country's mounting debt problems. His new book, The Debt Bomb, came out last month. Senator Tom Coburn joins us from Washington. Got great ideas, Senator, but I wonder in practice what we can really think about here. Your plan, you'd say $3 trillion from entitlements, $3 trillion from discretionary, $1 trillion from defense, $1 trillion from ending some spend. I mean, these are going to add up over time. 3, 6, 7, 8. That's almost $9 trillion is what you're talking about. Any traction at all that we can get before November on any of this?
Probably not, but the fact is we're going to do that because the international financial community is going to quit loaning to us eventually. And I'm convinced we're not going to do it until the pain of rising interest rates hits the politicians. Right. You go back to historical interest costs for our debt at $650 billion more a year for what we have on debt right now. It's an impossible situation we find ourselves in, and the longer we wait to do it, the longer we wait to make the tough choices, the more painful it's going to be.
Senator, I just had with Steve Rattner, really interesting, I thought anyway, but I'm strange, but we had a conversation. Steve we're talking about whose fault it is, and just for the heck of it, whose fault it is in Congress, and he says probably 60-40, the Republicans' fault not being able to get. Here's my point, though. If you're at 25% of government spending on GDP, and we fall into 15% of revenue because of the recession, he thinks we need to do both. We need to enhance some spending. My point is that since both tax increases and spending cuts both hurt the economy, and they're both sort of weak, I would just start, if you can only do one, we know government is too big. Start with that. Hopefully growth comes back, and that 15% that we raised gets back up to 18, where it was under the current tax structure. It was already there in 2007 and 2006, 2000, and then look at things. Doesn't that make sense?
Well, it makes sense, but, I think Mr. Ratner's point was you're going to have to build a consensus somewhere in the middle. That's why I was on
60-40, not really in the middle.
Well, I didn't say that.
I think he really was thinking 70-30, but 80-20.
Let me tell you whose fault it is. It's not RD. It's career politicians who are more interested in the next election than they are the future of our country.
Well, that covers just about everybody, Senator.
Well, no,
except for you, because you're only going to serve 2 terms.
Joe, that's not true. There's a lot of people up here who are term limited that don't care what happens to them, but really care what happens to the country. And there's not a political
some of
bone
those
in their
guys
body.
Some of those guys are those Tea Party guys that only care if they serve 2 years that were elected in 2010, and a lot of people would say those guys are the problem.
But hold on, Joe. The point that Steve just made, and Senator, I'd love you to respond to this. Steve made the point that 70% of Tea Partiers, am I
right, don't want to cut Medicare.
Don't want to cut Medicare. So you're getting what you're paying for in Washington right now.
The point is
elderly people don't want to touch Social Security. Yeah.
Here's the thing: is there's not a truthful conversation going on in the country because there's no leadership in this country right now about the severity of our problems or the urgency of our problems, and there's going to be some combination ultimately worked out. The question is at what price and at what time? And everything's going to continue as it is until it doesn't. And so, we see Spanish bonds where they are. We see the change in the Greek election. What makes us think that kind of stuff isn't going to happen to us? So I would say drop the partisanship. Let's find the common ground in the middle, and let's fix our country. And that's what we've put forward. We've put forward some tough measures, but we're going to get there eventually because they're not going to loan us the money to continue to run Medicare the way we are or continue to have Social Security the way we do. We're going to have to change it. And there needs to be an adult conversation in this country recognizing everybody contributes to the solution.
Yeah. But Senator, you've been an enormously constructive force on this subject, but now you're basically saying you don't really see any solution until interest rates start to rise. And as you know, at the moment, our interest rates are sitting flat at 2% on the 10-year and 3% on the 30-year.
Yeah, they're going to rise, though. You can't create $3 trillion, and you can't, the only reason we're not rising is we're still seen as the least wilted rose in the vase. When all the
and the Fed owns a ton.
I haven't heard that.
And so, who's buying our debt? The Fed's buying our debt. Number one, what's the demand for 30-year notes on U.S. bonds? Almost nothing. It's minimal. That's the reason they're not extending the maturity, which we'd love to be able to do, is nobody's out there willing to buy it.
Yep. All right. I think we're going to get 30
Senator,
seconds. We got 30 seconds.
All right. Senator, we'll talk to you next time.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Senator.
All right. Thank you all.
We appreciate it.
All right.
Okay. Coming up, blocking, tackling, and banks. We're going to huddle up with Joe Mowgli and get his